Let me just leave you with this one final thought. Now, most of the time when I go around to events like this, I'm talking about our big, beautiful bill, our working families tax cuts. And I want to leave us just with a reflection on that, because while we're talking about law and order today and we're honoring the police, one of the ways in which we rebuild the American dream is by allowing you to keep more of your hard-earned money. And that bill that these great congressmen worked on and the great senator here, what it did was very simple. It increased the child tax credit. It meant that we're going to increase take-home pay by about $10,000 over the 4 years of the Trump administration. It means that if you're working on tips or if you're working an overtime shift, the government is going to take less of your money. And I think that's a pretty good idea, because if you're working hard, I think the government ought to keep its hands out of your pocket. We're going to do all those things, because I believe the American dream is fundamentally about this principle. It's about the principle that for all the parents and grandparents out there, and I'm now the parent of 3 beautiful young kids, I just want them to have a better life than the life that I have. That, to me, is the core of the American dream. The promise that if you work hard and play by the rules, we're going to give our kids and we're going to give our grandkids something that's just a little bit more prosperous, a little bit more secure, and a little bit more proud than what we were given when we were kids. That is, I think, our sacred obligation. That by inheriting a great country from our parents and grandparents, we got to pass on something even greater to the next generation. But none of that matters without law and order and public safety. How can you have the American dream if you can't walk down your neighborhood in safety? How can you have the American dream if you're worried about getting mugged when you're taking your family out to a nice meal downtown? How can you have the American dream when every celebration, every big moment in a person's life, you're too worried about violent crime and not focused enough on the things that make life worth living? One of the things that we have got to get back to remembering is that if we want to preserve the American dream, we've got to preserve the right of everybody, rich or poor, to live in safety and security in their neighborhoods. You know, when I grew up in Middletown, Ohio in the 90s, we didn't have a whole lot of money. I was raised by a woman who struggled very often to put food on the table and clothes on her back. Mamaw. Everybody loves Mamaw. Most of all, me. But you know what? For all of the problems that we had, for all the times that Mamaw was worried about where our next meal would come from, for all the times that Mamaw was sometimes terrified that she wouldn't be able to make an important bill payment, we never worried about public safety. And the reason we never worried about public safety, the reason she knew I could go across the street and play in the park in safety and comfort, is because we had something in this country. And that was a recognition, Democrat and Republican, that we stood with law enforcement and we stood with their mission. It didn't matter what your political affiliation was. We wanted to support people who kept our communities safe. And that's something we've gotten away from, because a lot of the people who report on the news, a lot of the people who actually make policy in Washington, D.C., let's be honest, they are wealthy people who can block themselves off from the consequences of the policies they impose on the rest of us. Now maybe they've never had to call a police officer because they can call a private security guard. Maybe they've never had their home broken into because they live behind a gated community. Maybe they don't have to worry about walking down the streets of a city safely because they've got a driver in a big fancy car who can take them from point A to point B, but that is not true of the gross majority of our citizens. So I want to tell you, when I talk about protecting the American dream, when President Trump talks about fighting for the American dream, at the very top of that list is fighting for your ability, whether you're rich or poor, to be safe in the home that you love. It is our sacred obligation, it's their sacred obligation, and we're going to work for it every single day. God bless you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah!